All right, so I know I'm the closing keynote, and it's been a really long day, but before I get started, I'll let you know that I will keep this short so that I'm not standing in the way of you guys and your party. And since this has been such an awesome conference, let's give Jose and his team a round of applause for putting all this together. Thank you. Awesome. All right, so with that, let's get started on my keynote. And what I want to talk to you guys today is about how to onboard new hires into happy and productive teams. And the reason I brought this up also is because you've had a long day. Maybe you're a little tired of testing, so I thought let's switch gears and talk about something else, but still under the guise of Agile and testing. So, do you remember your first job? Raise your hand if you remember your very first job. Oh, everybody remembers this. This is awesome. Okay. I guess it's very memorable. I know mine was very memorable. I was getting ready to graduate, and I majored in computer science, and I really, really, really wanted to live out in Silicon Valley, mostly for the sunshine. And I remember grabbing every book I could, studying for weeks, for months, doing practice whiteboard challenges just so that I could land, a phone screen, and then perhaps an interview at a company in the Valley. And fortunately, I did. And I remember flying all the way out to California and having my first whiteboarding interview. I was a little nervous, but I got through it. And afterwards, I had to sit tight for about a week, but I got a job offer. And I remember when I got that job offer, I was thinking to myself, this is going to be awesome. This is like everything I've been working for in college. I'm going to have this amazing job. I'm going to be building really cool products. And on top of that, I'm going to have this amazing team that's going to mentor me, and they're going to teach me all about software development. And it's going to be fantastic. How many of you kind of had this glamorized story in your head? Oh, just a couple of you, okay. The rest of you are probably smarter than me. So I had this, notion in my head, and then I realized that about a week in, maybe even the first day, reality set in. And what was that reality? Well, it was on the first day being thrust into a 1,000,000-line code product that was almost as old as I was at the time. And on top of that, I had to deal with things like sitting in a meeting and not knowing what the heck people were talking about. There was jargon all over the place. People kind of had their inner circle. There was some debating going on. And I kind of felt left out, but I thought, you know what? I'm the new kid on the block. Just suck it up and deal with it. And after a couple weeks passed, I thought, well, let me just reach out to somebody, maybe a teammate, maybe my boss, and get a sense of what I'm doing wrong. Maybe I'm missing something here. And sure enough, people were like, it's okay. You're not really expected to do anything in the first 3 months. Some people were like 6 months. I was like, I didn't sign up for a vacation, I signed up to get work done. And I thought, it's got to be me. And maybe you thought this as well. It's got to be you. You didn't sign up for the right thing, or you're not making the best use of your time. You never really think it's the organization, right? Well, it turns out that it can be the organization, and that there's kind of 3 bosses that perpetuate this. The first is this absent boss, the person that's not there on your first day, right? You show up all excited, hoping that they're going to show you the ropes, but they've maybe signed up for a conference, or worse yet, they've decided to go on vacation. And this happens time and time again. The other is the absent-minded boss, and depending on which side of the pond you're on, maybe one of these two identify as this person, right? You know the feeling. They mean well, they want to be there, they want to be supportive, but really they're not doing anything to really train you. And as if the absent-minded boss isn't bad enough, there's the unaware boss, the boss who thinks they know everything, and they sit there on your first day, maybe talking you through a number of things that they've worked on and how they're amazing, calling it their training, and all the while you're thinking, what did I sign up for? Why am I here? So, this makes you feel like, okay, this is work. This is how work is, and we just gotta suck it up. Or maybe the next company will be different. The next job will be different, right? But is it really? So why does this happen, right? Why is it that time and time again, when we're a new hire or we even bring teammates on, we kind of see it and we're afraid to kind of watch the train wreck, but we can't help but play into this. Why does this happen? Well, we all fall prey to the #1 tactic of recruiting. Does anybody know what this is? Feel free to shout it out if you do. The promised land? It's pretty close. Yeah. Exactly, yes. Basically, they tell you what you want to hear, right? And that's kind of what they're told, because at the end of the day, they are salespeople. And so it doesn't make us feel good, though, right, to be told what we want to hear. And then they kind of go back and justify the behavior. It's, well, we're a startup. We move really fast, so people just have to learn on their own. Or we're a big company. We can't control what each team does and how they onboard new hires. Or maybe we're a remote company. New hires need to learn things on their own. Or maybe you've heard this. We're a local in-house team, and new hires should feel comfortable pinging the person sitting next to them. Right? So there's kind of an infinite number of excuses that people come up with. Can't help but feel lost at the end of the day, and maybe we hop onto LinkedIn and brush off our resume hoping that we'll get another job, a better job, that will actually care about us. Or we find solace in watching cat videos. But this is no way to spend year after year, right? So what happens when we don't invest in onboarding? Well, the first is missed deadlines, right? And why does this happen? Well, if we're not introduced to the entire product or the scope of the project, then obviously scope creep is going to come up, and we're going to miss deadlines. The second is we tend to burn out, right? We get demotivated, we're working so hard to try to learn things on our own, and we can't help but lose sight of this, which ultimately leads to high turnover and adding to that ever-present toxic culture. Now, does it have to be this way? Absolutely not. In fact, when companies invest in simple practices when it comes to onboarding, they see significant results. The first is that 91% of employees actually stick around through their first year. And if that's not enough, then 69% of them stick around for 3 or more years. And that's when they make a significant impact. So as you can see, onboarding is valuable. But whenever I say this, people are then like, well, you talked about the 3 bosses. It's all top down. So how can we make any change as testers, as individual contributors, kind of as teammates? And here's the thing. It doesn't matter whether you are the leader or if you are an individual contributor. Everybody can make a change. And given that we're on an Agile team, it actually makes it easier, right? Because we've already got a small team. And as we bring people in, we can impact how we want to onboard them. Now, I'm not saying tomorrow to go to your boss and say, well, Poornima said I didn't need to listen to you, and I can just do whatever I want. But what I mean by this is you can come up with your own best practices internally and play them out. So you're probably thinking, okay, well, you're going to fit in one of 2 camps. The first camp is this really going to work for me, Poornima? I don't know. Some of you might be skeptical, on the fence. Yeah, that's okay. I expect that. And then there's probably another set of you who are here thinking, well, this really isn't going to work for me, and whatever strategy you throw out, I've already tried, it's going to fail. I'm just here for the jokes and counting down the time till we go to the party. So I understand if you fit into one of these 2 camps, so bear with me. And I want to give you a little bit of cred so that you can understand why. Maybe you just want to listen to me a little bit longer. So the first is I started off my career as an R&D engineer. I was writing test automation software for chip manufacturers like Intel and AMD. And then from there, I got lured into startup land, where I was the founding engineer of Mint.com, the personal finance site. I built the prototype, I launched it, and I scaled it. And as I was growing our engineering team from 0 to about 10 to 15, that's when I realized the importance of onboarding, and I single-handedly did onboard a number of our employees. Now, if that wasn't enough, I realized that people really didn't put into place a lot of best practices when it came to things like testing. So when I started BusyBee, I made sure that I built a culture where we were test-driven first, we still valued employee onboarding. And then from there, I went on to start Femgineer, an education company where we help techies like yourselves build products and companies. And then since then, I've joined as a CTO and co-founder this summer to an on-demand childcare app called Au Pair. We help parents connect with vetted sitters. And I've also been an entrepreneur in residence at 500 startups and Techstars, 2 accelerators, where we help a lot of startups grow from 0 to 100 employees. And I've also had to write and self-publish 2 books, so I've done a lot of recruiting outside of just the technical space. So all this is to say that I've done onboarding in a number of contexts, and you can kind of pick a couple strategies and see which will fit for you. Now, all I ask is that as testers, you take maybe 1 or 2 strategies today and test them out in your workplace or somewhere else. And the beauty of these strategies is you don't even have to do them at work. You can do them at your next hackathon because, hey, you got to recruit teammates to participate. Or if you're working on a side project at work, you also have to recruit people either from your team or somewhere else. Or anything other than even tech, right? If you're recruiting a contractor to come and work and redesign your house, still an opportunity to onboard somebody. So consider these strategies in a number of contexts. Now, whenever I talk to a hiring manager or somebody who's a team lead, I ask them this question: what does the first day, week, or month look like? And what surprises me is that nobody has an answer, or hardly anybody has an answer. And again, the excuses are like, well, it's really different if you're a front-end person versus a designer versus a back-end versus a QA tester. I get all of that. I get that everyone has different roles, but that doesn't mean that you can't have some sort of streamlined process, right? So this is the question that you want to start by answering. What does that first day, week, and month look like? And get into as much detail as possible. Because the richer you make this experience, the more likely you are to retain that employee. And what that means is, what do they need to accomplish in that first day or in that first week? And is that repeatable, right? Because you want to make it realistic. And keep in mind, again, that people sign up to do work. So they want to show up on day 1, and they want to get stuff done. They don't want to sit there and watch cat videos. They could just do that at home. So the first place to start is with your people. Right? And every time I say this, I'm amazed at how many organizations don't invest the time to do something as basic as introduce the new hire to everybody on the team. And I don't mean everybody in the company, I mean literally everybody on a Scrum team, right? And when you do that, you want to start by talking about who does what, and you want to get even more nuanced, right? How do people oversee and interact with each other? How do they operate? So let's say Sally enjoys working from home and she prefers that people Slack her. Mention that. Or Tim can't stand it when people check in their code without tests. Say that. The more of these quirks that you expose, the less it feels like somebody just joined a company and more like they joined a family that cares. So keep that in mind. Now, the second is product, and a lot of times people are like, oh, it's a consumer product, they should just be able to log on and check it out. Is there really a need to walk people through it? But even though it might be a consumer or enterprise product, people don't necessarily understand what's going on underneath. So the first place you want to start is by doing an architecture review, right? Talk about kind of the holistic view of how everything operates, how maybe the QA team interacts with product, with design, with engineering, and that gives people a sense of what's going on. The second is the product roadmap. And whenever I say this, people are like, but that's going to be so much. They're going to get so afraid. They're going to run out the door. They're not going to come back. Right? Like, who do you think you just hired? Right? Some milquetoast person? No, they can handle it. And the more likely you are to give them all that information, walk them through what's already been built and what's coming up ahead, then the more likely they are to contribute and point out issues that they may be able to help. Or they might decide, hey, this isn't really my thing, but here's some suggestions I have, right? So get them involved in the product roadmap, even if it's going to change in a matter of weeks or months. Now, I know there are some folks out there who just love to stump their employees on the first day. And they tell me things like, well, if they really can't set up their machine on the first day on their own, maybe they don't deserve to work here. And I think that's a pretty toxic culture, because if you are a front-end designer, you have no business debugging the database, right? Why wouldn't you make the setup a cinch for them? So think about how you can streamline this process so they've got the product up and ready and they can get started working. Sure, it's going to take some iterations to get it to be seamless, but the more likely you are to get them set up, the more productive they're going to be on that first day. Which brings me to the next thing you want to do, which is give them a project, right? It doesn't matter how small or how meaty it is, whether you want them to push code to production on the first day, or you want them to do something as simple as, debug one particular ticket, right? Figure out what that's going to be. And also set expectations for how they can get help. Are they going to be able to get pair program with somebody or have a mentor, right? Set the expectations early on. Now, whenever I mention this word, people start to cringe. Does anybody here hate this word? And I know why they hate this word, right? You hate this word because with process, you just feel like you're stifled. Well, I think part of that is the connotation of process, is that too often people feel like when they have a process, they have to stick with it. And I don't think that that has to be the case. I think it has to evolve over time, but it serves as guide rails for your team. And so part of process is getting the ball rolling, knowing what you want to do. It's making sure people understand the priorities, and surprisingly enough, helping them to understand what the conflicting priorities are. And whenever I say this, people kind of smirk, and they're like, well, isn't that kind of letting on too much? Well, here's the thing. If you know that management and the engineering team don't necessarily see eye to eye on certain things, why not expose that early on? Why throw them in a stakeholder meeting or in a customer meeting where they're going to get eaten up, right? Why not expose this and help them be successful in that first meeting? This is another word people don't like, policies, Why do we have these things? Well, again, the point of policies isn't to necessarily, be restrictive. It's why do we do things the way that we do? And I want to give you a couple examples of some companies today who have invested in onboarding and have been successful with their employees as a result. So the first is this company, Olark. How many of you know Olark? They do live chat. It's basically that little chat widget. Okay, one person. So that's all right. I'm spreading the word here. So they do live chat, that little chat widget when you go onto an e-commerce site or basically any SaaS site. And very early on, the CEO and one of the founders decided that they wanted to provide all their employees, despite whether they were customer support or an engineer or a designer or a marketer, a unified experience. And the unified experience they decided was that everybody was going to do a chat duty, meaning that they were going to have to support customers that came and asked them questions. They were going to man live chat. And the benefit of doing this was twofold. The first, everybody knew what the product did. And the second was that everybody was able to interact with customers on some level. So they started to have that immediate connection, which got them invested even more in the product and more in the customers. But it also built this great link across the organization, because now people had something to talk about, whether they were a marketer or whether they were an engineer. So when they got together, there wasn't this awkward moment of oh, you're in marketing, you're in engineering. You can instead talk about the thing that matters most, the product and customers. Netflix, aside from its impressive stock price, has also done a lot of great things. And what's amazing is how quickly they're growing. They've still factored in onboarding because they know how hard it is to recruit and retain. So the first thing they do is they make sure the technology is up and running when somebody signs up to be a new hire. The second is they give that person a dedicated mentor for a number of months when they're getting started. And then they get to work on a real meaty project, which may mean pushing to production on their first day. But again, it's that instant customer interaction and that feeling of gratification at the end of their first day. And then finally, and I thought this was pretty cool, is that they get to meet the top execs. So yes, if you're a new hire at Netflix, you get to meet the CEO, Reed Hastings. How many companies can you say that about? Now, the benefit, again, of doing this is you see that there isn't so much hierarchy here. You're getting people to connect across both hierarchies, as well as giving them a sense of what it's like to work immediately from day one. Problems. Nobody likes talking about their problems, do they? It's kind of a sense of shame, but let's face it. I don't think anybody, maybe I at 22 thought, oh, this company doesn't have problems, but barring me, right, no one is going to come in thinking that a company doesn't have problems. So why not just open them up to your new hires and expose them? And then do something like ask them at the end of their first 100 days, what did they see in those first 100 days? And then go beyond that, right? It's not enough to just see it. And this doesn't mean that they have to come up with a laundry list of things, right? you can whittle it down and ask them, what's the one thing you want to change? Now, this might seem like a lot, because they already have their day jobs where they're doing their thing, and now you're telling them to go fix company problems, right? It seems like a lot to take on. But here's the thing. What happens when you do this? What happens when you get people invested in your company's problems? They care, exactly. You get to identify who's truly vested in the company and who's just there to collect a paycheck, right? And it doesn't matter whether it's a political problem or something as simple as everybody needs to write test cases before they check in code, right? Let them pick what their problem is. And the benefit of doing this is you end up retaining these people, and because they now have a mission inside the company, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to go out and tell their friends, their family, and help you recruit. And that's how you end up attracting more people into your organization. So I've given you a lot of strategies here, right, that you can choose from. And all I ask is that you go back and you audit your current onboarding, right? Take a look at what you're doing. Are you investing today in your people, letting them get to know the new hires? Are you investing in product, giving people that overview and that roadmap? What about your process, and what about your policies? If you're already doing this, awesome, keep doing it. In fact, tell us what's working and what isn't. But if you're in the other camp of, yeah, this won't work for me, right? That's okay too. Because remember, you can create a small test case. You don't even have to apply it to your company. Consider using it for something else, for recruiting whatever project you want to work on and controlling how you retain those folks. So, why is this important again? Why is onboarding important? Well, remember, it's hard to find and keep good people. And after all, it is what people that helps us build software. Thank you, guys. And if you'd like more, you can take a picture of this lovely slide and download my free ebook on how to transform your ideas into software products. I walk you through the steps of going from idea to prototype if you've got some ideas you want to put out there. You can also check out my YouTube channel called Femgineers. I do a lot of weekly videos on product and engineering and other things. And you can stay in touch with me. All right? Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. So, interesting, very interesting talk. So, any questions? May I?
Hi, awesome talk, thanks. How do you keep the people that you've onboarded?
Yeah, that's a great. Come back next year and I'll do that keynote.
Okay, you get invited. So, okay.
What is the craziest thing you've done while onboarding someone?
Craziest thing. There were probably some practices that HR people who are in the room shouldn't hear, which include things like taking shots. So that's probably the one I can talk about that's the, most viable. The other things I think are, doing fun stuff. I remember I had a friend where just to see if they really were in this startup mode, we went trapezing. Just to see if we could get along, communicate, and because I wasn't sure if she could handle working together. And at the end, we were best buds, so it worked out. But yeah, you can push the buttons.
Oh, it's not as you can get it. It's no problem. Sorry.
It's not like I can judge for all European countries, but from my experience in Germany, not just in software, but also friends getting new jobs, it's actually quite normal to get some introduction.
Okay.
Could it be, and I cannot judge for all German companies or whatsoever, and I've also heard bad stories about introduction, but usually there is some type of program. Could it be that the US-American culture is maybe different and that you have some harsher problems in that? For instance,
yeah.
Sometimes I hear saying that people say it's way more competitive, so people rather might think, oh, I don't care if my colleague is getting along or not. Maybe that contributes to the situation sometimes?
Yes and no, because while it's competitive, there's also a 1.6 million deficit in terms of software developer jobs. So the challenge isn't necessarily that they're trying to weed out candidates. I think part of it is they're trying to see if people can maybe fit into the culture, right? And a lot of this is kind of a founder or CEO trickling down, so you have to be careful of that. But a lot of times people also get so big over time that they forget little things like onboarding. So I think that's another challenge is there are US companies that are just growing very quickly. They lose sight on best practices, or they're not prioritized. And so that's kind of another challenge. Because I would say, even contrary to that, there are some big companies like Netflix that's growing very rapidly that invests a lot. So it's more on a company-to-company level. I wouldn't slide the US companies under the rug and say they're not doing it.
Please.
My question is, did you find that the culture changed? I'm working in England, and I find that lots of people don't stay in the same place for long. They want to change, actually, and doing onboarding more as train them up and get them productive quite quickly so they have a value for the company before they leave again. So do you have at least...
Yeah, I gotta say, a lot of young tech companies have no, I think, they're not unaware in knowing that people are going to leave. They know that the turnover is going to be 2 to 3 years. So it's not ramp them up quickly so that they get stuff done and then they're out of here. It's, ramp them up so they feel productive, they learn, and we know they're going to go somewhere else. But when they go somewhere else, are they going to show up and be good ambassadors for us? Right? Because there's a lot of that as well. And keep in mind, people are still going to use those products in the new company. So they want to kind of retain that brand loyalty. So I wouldn't say it's, hey, yes, move quickly so that they get to work quickly. It's the latter of, let's get them onboarded, let's have them feel part of this, and then if they go somewhere else, they go somewhere else. No one has that pretense of like, oh, they're going to be here for life. It's not a thing. And in the millennial generation, it's definitely not a thing. Yeah.
Hi. I have like 2 fast questions. Is it common for you to fail someone probation period? Is it common practice for you? And what the main reason of failing someone's probation period? Is it like more professional or cultural or something else they will say? And the second question, what do you think, what is the average, like the golden average to work with the one company? So.
Yeah. So your first question is putting people on probation. Like, why do they get put on probation? Like, why do they fail out of it?
Is it common practice to fail someone's probation, and what is the main reason?
Well, sadly, some companies have this practice called stack ranking. Maybe you've heard of it. It's no matter, you're smiling, so maybe you've heard of this. No matter how many employees I have, let's say I have 9 employees, there's always going to be a top 3, a middle 3, and a bottom 3. And at the end of the year, no matter how amazing that bottom 3 might have performed compared to that top 3, they're going to be let go. So sometimes that happens, right, where there's just a quota where people have to, and people are moving away from that practice, but it's just a fact that exists today. The other case is, there's a lot of debate around whether it's the culture, whether it's investing in employees, whether it's the skills the employee had. But quite frankly, I think it does have a lot to do with culture on whether somebody stays in an organization or not. They get demotivated very quickly. There's a lot of studies on like how top performers get demotivated and how they don't perform well in toxic cultures. So I don't necessarily think it has to do with, oh, this person can't like QA test or write code to save their life. I think a lot of it has to do with that culture. Your second question was, remind me again. Oh, yes.
What golden average to stay with one company and before changing?
Yeah, kind of depends on the demographics. So I think, my parents' generation and a generation that came after it was definitely more of that like 5+ year. And now in sort of the millennial culture, you're lucky if you get somebody for 2 years. So like 2 to 4 is kind of the standard. And in the Valley, it tends to be like 3 if you're lucky. And if you've got great benefits.
Okay. So, okay.
Unless somebody else has a question.
Sorry.
Do you think that the 5+ year is success or fail with the one company?
Oh.
It depends. I mean, some companies people just love working at because they get presented with challenges over again and again. So I wouldn't necessarily stereotype and say, oh, it's somebody got lazy and didn't want to polish off their LinkedIn profile and apply somewhere else. It could just be that the company was dynamic, it was growing, depending on when they started. If it was a startup and then grew to a public company, there's a lot going on that can keep people motivated. And then sure, there's places where people stay through and through because it's a great, package, they're getting paid well, they're getting benefits, why not? So I'd say there's definitely both of those sides. Yep.
I have an opinion on that. I think this is like a marriage. I mean, it's really, it's like
I've
a
only been married
marriage.
for a year,
It's-
so I can't comment.
No, really, I think like a marriage. I think if you take care from both sides, so it could be a very long relation.
Sure.
But if not, then it's not.
Yeah.
A father of my friend of mine said, if you don't get food at home, you go to a restaurant. So that's it. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. So, questions. Okay. You get it? Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Hi, thanks for the nice talk. One question, what do you think, how long should this onboarding process last? So you were talking about like a mentor for 3 months or
Yeah.
like onboarding it in 1 day, or what do you consider like a reasonable onboarding time?
Yeah, well, that comes back to, like I said, what do you expect in the first day, week, and month? So it could be as little as a month, depending on how big your company is, and some places like to do it for longer, 3 months, 6 months. It really boils down to how much information do you feel like you need to impart? So it's kind of like onboarding a customer, right? It may take 7 days to get them from free to pay, or it might take them 30 days, right? You've got to kind of test and figure that out. But what the theme I'm seeing is, most places it's 1 month, and then a lot of places are extending it to 100 days just because they want to kind of see people through an initial project, and usually that project takes about 3 months or like a quarter to finish.
Thanks.
Uh-huh.
More questions?
Up front?
Okay. So,
What I understand from your talk is that you say it's an onboarding of a certain time, but I can imagine it's even better if you have an onboarding and a mentor for maybe a month or for 3 months, and then later on you find, okay, he finds his way, but then you can still use this mentor right
Sure.
if you need it at that time, and then you will stick to the company maybe longer. So it's a whole culture, not only about onboarding. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't think you have to think of it also as one person mentoring you. People get mentorship from various employees. People then go on because they enjoyed it, they want to pay it back and do it for the next set. So having that cycle is valuable.
One question. I think I agree with him. That's like a marriage, but
let's stick
always,
to food.
yeah,
Yes.
always have the both sides. Sometimes the company look like we are not a school. You are not growing with me because if you change because you have more a big salary for €10 or $10 hours, and you move it. And the another side is I want to keep you with me because we are growing. In your experience, what is best important to keep, or if you want to leave because you need to receive more, that's okay, that's
Sure.
your choice.
Yeah, well, one thing I didn't tell you about me, a secret, it doesn't have to be a secret, but I love firing people too. So that's the other side to this, is if somebody doesn't fit, you have to own up and say, it's not a good fit. We either can't give you the salary you want, the projects, or we really can't pander to your personality. You got to let them go and move on. So I think you have to get comfortable also with firing people to retain the culture that you care about. And yes, if there are some non-negotiables like a salary or stock options or benefits or whatever, then again, those maybe are people who aren't the ones who are there to kind of be your crusaders or your champions. They're there because they are collecting a paycheck. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, all right? I think if that's something that people need, then they deserve it. But if you are building a slightly different culture, you're a startup or smaller company or mom and pop shop, then maybe you need the people who are gonna say, hey, okay, I'm willing to take a cut because I believe in the mission, I believe I'm going to grow with this company, I believe I'm going to get challenged, and so they want to contribute. So you've got to figure out what that culture is for your organization, and as the hiring manager or as the founder, make sure it's clear, and if somebody doesn't fit into that, then course correct as fast as possible, because you don't want people sticking around who aren't getting what they want. It's not fair to them, but it's also not fair to the other employees for them to complain.
So more questions, guys.
Oh, over there.
Over there. Okay. You get it?
So, would you employ something like an onboarding process when someone needs a new challenge, is moved over to another team, or even when you set up new teams?
Yeah, I think that could be great. I don't think it has to apply just to new hires. In fact, we actually started doing this at Au Pair, where we even do work-alongs, or we give people a small project in the recruiting phase itself, so that we can see how they think, how they interact, how they solve problems, how quickly they turn around a project. So it doesn't have to be just hiring people. You can use it in a number of contexts. Yep.
Okay. So, last question. Okay. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.